Yeah, response video to Matt. So there's been a couple of videos by My Misery and Me and the Poetry Guy. Yeah, I don't think they've been nearly nasty enough. So, no, anyway, yeah, just for old time's sake, I shall play his video and see what it says. But yeah, it's going to be the same babble. But anyway, it's curious times on the internet. And even I'll say something snarky to Piero. He doesn't say anything of substance in his videos. But he did some little, just trivialize the whole philosophy of antinatalism. And I don't think, Piero, it's going to go away. I think it's just going to get stronger and stronger. And I think it's already seen in the whole evolution of culture and where that's headed. As stated before, most people are not feeling any necessity to maintain human existence by having babies enough to do it. And I think there is a huge philosophical undercurrent that has great doubts about what human beings are. We see we can't even in the best of times, we can't resist the temptation to war and enslave and do all this ugly, disgusting shit. And somehow that all rises to the top. That gets all the power. And there's no denying that simple truth. People want it that way. Humans suck. Anyway. And theoretically, if you culled all the crap out of the human race, you might be able to find a handful of human beings that could build something called a real civilization. But that's what it requires, a Venus Project idea. But, the Venus Project doesn't supply us with the how do you get rid of all the asshole part. Because the human race has a gigantic, gaping asshole. So anyway, but yeah, Piero's just full of shit. And the Kanavad's always just talking religious mumbo-jumbo. Despook is basically calling his schizophrenia God. And Greytex is saying he can't figure out that we don't know anything about anything. We don't know what a fact is. No, too complicated. The universe is complex. Yeah. So anyway, atheists are not atheists. It's quite obvious. It's just more the lying that people do.
So I was watching a video by My Misery and Me, and he was trying to dismiss speculation as not necessarily dangerous. It's not thought crime, but it is kind of worthless, useless. It can't possibly ever lead one to the truth, because it's merely subjective, it's personal.
No, it's full of shit. It's not made of anything real. It's phantasmagorical nonsense. And yes, if you want to tell stories by metaphoring it and talking about Brer Rabbit or Winnie the Pooh and have some sort of, moral statement written into your fantasy, there's no rule against Seven Dwarfs. You can make up shit like that when you're telling a story. When you're going to talk about reality, well, yeah, you got to get rid of all the little magical stuff. And you got to deal with what the facts are. And the facts start with the evolution of matter. And we're part of that syndrome. In particular circumstance, clearly, replicating molecule. And that's the biggest fact of our existence. You can play all kinds of games, but that's the big fact. Big, giant fact. And it's conformed us. It's formed us. Everything that we are, everything you're experiencing, everything you think means something, was created by natural selection. I mean, I've said this before, but we're basically war machines, and we have war hardware. That's what we're built to do. And you can pretend there's something else going on, but that's the mechanism. That's the reality. And if you're not going to conform to that truth, then yeah, you're just going to be talking shit. I mean, you have to deal with some of these facts. You can't just ignore all of them and start from the beginning and make up a story about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden, and that's all you want to do. You want to ignore what we know and create some other intrigue story. And so you don't like the serpent and the evil and the this and the that, so you're going to make up some other story but it's a story, and it's not coherent to what we do know.
You know, it's not scientific, right? It's not based on anything objective. It's not based on sort of dispassionate consideration of our situation and of our evolutionary origins. That's my misery and me's perspective. I think, though, this dismissal of speculative thought or philosophy or spirituality or theology or whatever as merely personal kind of misses the point. And the point is that, well, first of all, there is really no such thing as objective knowledge, scientific knowledge that rises above mere cultural belief or wishful.
Well, it's right there. So this is what we're supposed to, as intelligences. This is acceptable. Everything is just turned into mush. We just might as well forget being Madame Curie or doing any of this experimenting or studying anything or dissecting anything or figuring anything out, because you'll just dismiss it as some sort of theory or some sort of it never happened. You're just saying it never happened. We never invented the telephone. We never invented language. We're speaking a goddamn language, but no, we never invented it, never built it, never constructed it, never conformed it, never improved it, never did any of that shit. It never happened. Even though we're speaking it, it didn't happen. I mean, this is just bullshit. I mean, it's just, I mean, call bullshit on yourself. This is just bullshit. Everything isn't just a matter of some sort of let's just make it up. Tree god, frog god, abiogenesis. Yeah, all the same. No, not all the same. Some is based on what's called evidence, and some is not.
Thinking. Science is also itself a cultural activity. It's embedded in society.
Well, look, you can play this game with science. Yeah, right now, science is basically a commercial enterprise. That's right. The capitalists who capitalize on everything that has any kind of value, if they can make it into a gun, they'll turn it into a gun. That's right. They'll turn it into something they can make money off of. So, yes, science has been, a lot of it has been corrupted by the egos of the scientists and by the money they can make by selling the products, the direct products of science. The useful constructs of science, the mechanisms, the miniaturized products and whatnot, and even the theoretical science that they can package into some sort of woo-woo, wow-wow TV show or something. Yeah, so there's a lot of their personal agenda that has tainted the structure of science. But the basic mechanism underlying that is discovery of the truth. And part of the problem, I suppose, is that all the real meaningful truths have been discovered. All the really big stories have been told. And the big proof was Darwin and Mendel and, all the other attachments to, that basic story. And so we have a lot of the story. Now, maybe you want the details of the story. Maybe you want, you're going to wait until you have some sort of, exactly how many hairs were on the atom's back of his hand or some kind of other nonsense minutia. But the point is Darwin has given us the narrative that is the truth of our ancestry, and you're just saying, I don't want to believe it, so I'm going to pretend it's just as illegitimate a truth as somebody's unicorn theory. That's just goddamn rude to intelligence. You're just being rude to intelligence. You're insulting it, you're raping it. You're a fucking intelligence raper.
Mixed up with politics, and mixed up with personal narrative. Evolutionary theory is highly speculative.
Yeah, what? What part of it? What part of it is speculative? The abiogenesis in the 4 billion years? Oh, you want to speculate about exactly how, whether it's punctuated equilibrium or highlighted, fornication or whatever. You want to argue over subtle mechanisms that are more inducive to mutations and what mechanisms are less inducive. You want to argue even the psychology, evolutionary psychology and this whole idea of whether, a social animal and whether they're mimicking each other or whether they're mimicking their enemies or whether they acquire the behavior of their enemies over time or some other kind of psychology crap. You want to argue over those nuances and call it theory because we don't have every one of those details nailed down exactly. We don't have a videotape of 4 billion years. We got a pretty good timeline. We got a pretty good visualization of it. We got 15 frames a second. We don't need 7 million frames a second. It's not going to make any difference to the factual, functional story that we have. We have enough frames. We have enough pixels to resolve what we're watching. We can tell what movie it is. And again, you're just insulting all that work. You're insulting our intelligence. You're insulting my intelligence. You're insulting anyone who gives a fuck about the truth or a fact or the acquisition of intelligence and knowledge. You're just insulting it all. You're spitting on it. You're shitting on it. You're pissing on it. You're doing something offensive to it, which is denying it.
Based on observation, but it's based on a lot of inferences about observations. Sound inferences in many cases, I think. But still, it's evolutionary theory and narrating the history of evolution, of the evolution of life, is a kind of storytelling, and you can.
Well, yeah, it's always going to be. That's right. You're always going to have to put together from the artifacts that are left over. You're not going to fly back into the past. You're not going to redo. You're not going to be able to get a front row seat at the 1942 World Series or whatever. I guess it wasn't one that year, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to go get a seat. You're not going to be able to do it. Okay? Yeah, you can only put together from the pieces, from what's the artifacts that are left behind. And yeah, we got rock solid pieces. And again, you want to mess it all up. You want to pretend that this story isn't a valid, hard, rock solid story. That somehow the human race needs to work on it 1 million more years. Well, I'm telling you, if the human race works on it for 1 million more years, they're not going to change one basic stone in this story. You can add some frames, you can add some detail, you can add a little three-dimensionality, but you're not going to change the story.
See this in anthropology, especially when science begins to try to study the human animal, because part of studying the human animal involves studying culture. And usually anthropologists will look at religion and then social norms, and it's not very often that you get an anthropology of science itself.
Well, whatever. I mean, even bringing up anthropology is kind of, breaking the rules a little bit, because, some of that, there's a whole segment of that science. It isn't really science. It is just make shit up. And it isn't terribly valuable, I don't think. I don't think it's of any value, really, because since Freud, we have the mechanism right here. Our ancestry, our history is inside of us right now, in our chromosomes and in our ancestors that still exist. Distant ancestors, but they're still here. We know what a primate is.
As a human cultural activity, but there are many thinkers doing this now. Bruno Latour is perhaps the most well-known. He's giving his Gifford lectures right now.
Who cares?
University of Edinburgh.
I sure don't.
Anyone who's interested in ideas.
I don't care. That's
and
right.
A sort of anthropology of science.
Yeah, right.
You should check out
Make
these
up
lectures
shit.
by Latour.
Yeah, I'm sure it's full of bullshit.
Because he's trying to lead us forward, not beyond culture, as if we could hope to wake up from the dream that all these pre-modern societies have had to the truth itself through the light of reason. This whole Enlightenment story.
Well, look, it is, though. It's a fact that, we've acquired knowledge. That's why, the proof of it is the fact that we can manipulate the world, that we could land on the moon. You can only do that when you acquire knowledge of how the thing works. And obviously we've acquired pretty functional knowledge. So I think there's a pretty good demonstration that we have accurately discerned some truth here.
But Latour is trying to give us a clearer view of of where we are and where we're going.
Yeah, well,
He's
we'll
trying to
see
give us
about
a story
that.
that we can all.
All right, so what, you're selling his books? What's the point? You're going to just go on and on. Okay, I'll go to the damn link, and I'm sure it's going to be nonsense. But whatever, go on, finish, let's go, say something.
Believe in and assent to and act on behalf of, as if it were true. Because really, we only have the as if, right? So whatever truth is, we can't pretend like it's objective. We have to.
Right. We can't pretend we know that we're on a planet that we decided that we're going to call it Earth, that it's got this much oxygen on it, or this much nitrogen, this much carbon, and they mix together in a certain way. We can't understand greenhouse effect. We can't understand the poisoning of the planet. We can't understand the difference between our food and our poop. I mean, this is just a fucking disgusting accusation that we have made no progress and now still need to make up an Adam and Eve story because we don't know what we are. And that's just a lie. It's just a denial of every bit of effort that went into building this understanding, and because you don't like the writing on this wall, you're just going to try to whitewash it away. And it's just so dishonorable. It's such a cowardly, lousy, rotten, stinking thing to do because people had to pay such a high price to get there, to get here, to get to this place in time where we can actually understand and see the truth and be free of the slavery to dumb ideas. We finally have the power to do it, and you're trying to cut the legs off. Fucking evil bastards.
No reason to believe. We've never, in fact, observed even an objective truth. It's not possible, right? We're in.
Yeah, whatever. Again, just running away from this idea of objective. There's two definitions. Okay, one just has to do with the bias for distorting the truth. So some sort of bias that you inject between your vision and the reality, and you break it. And the other is having the perfect perspective, a perspective that has everything in it. So it's either completeness or bias is the only thing that can destroy a perspective. And those two things, we can understand when things are unfinished to some substantial degree. You can tell when a car isn't built yet. Doesn't wheels, doesn't roll, doesn't move. You can tell when something's just not good enough. And you can tell quite obviously when you're perverting and distorting for your own purposes. So these are two things we, as individuals, can see in ourselves. We can tell whether we're playing that, violating objectivity. But don't tell me I don't know the difference. Don't tell me I can't tell. Don't tell me I don't know, because I do know. And I know there's no flaw in my objectivity when I say something like, yeah, the planet Earth isn't flat.
Headed in an inherently intersubjective universe where, yeah, there are plenty of objects, but there are always objects that are intermingled with one another, objects whose very identities depend upon their relationships with other objects. So when we try to study the world, the real world, we have to begin with a relationship.
Yeah, well, whatever. That doesn't get in the way in any way at all. You can just understand that. We understand that we are individual, selfish organisms. That's really easy to understand. Science can tell us so. We can certainly understand our grotesque psychological biases. We can understand the mechanisms of our senses and their limitations. So again, this is just all babble. It's this vague accusation because there is a potential liability, like you can walk, but walking means you might fall down. Well, so what? Walking kicks ass. It works very well, generally speaking, and falling down, generally speaking, isn't the worst thing in the world that can happen. So, yeah, do some walking. I'm going to do some thinking, but I'm going to do thinking within this constraint that I actually have to be walking. You know, the thinking actually has to be honest and real. You can't just make it up in your head.
There are no separate objects. There is no separate external objective world that a scientist might come to study as if from outside without any sort of emotional or subjective connection to it.
Well, whatever. I think there are concepts that there are completely isolated and only can be understood abstractly. So you can only understand them through your creation of them in part of your mental model. You can never interact with them physically. So I don't think that's entirely true anyway. And beyond that, it doesn't matter. I mean, the fact that the whole thing is moving doesn't mean that we can't see. We're not blinded by the movement.
And what a theologian is trying to do when they speculate on the human condition is not just to account for the universe as a scientist would, but to account for the possibility of personal existence in this universe.
Oh, whatever. I mean, ascribing motives to the theologian. I mean, what a joke. You have some honorable list of theologians somewhere. I'd like to see it. All right, let me see your list of honorable theologians. Ones who aren't just filling their own pockets because a bunch of ignorant, drooling assholes will sit there in awe at their ability to sing a song, or their ability to orate, or some other crap. But go ahead, show me your theologian with integrity. Let me see your theologian with integrity. Let me see the list. How long is it? 2 names?
And in a way, they begin to ask, well, if I can come to exist in this universe, and you can come to exist in this universe, what does that say about what the universe itself must be? What, in other words, are the conditions for the actuality of my experience right now?
Yeah, consumption, reproduction, cannibalism, addiction. Island planet of gladiator war. 4 billion years. 500 million years of sentient creatures ripping each other's skins off so they can just say, I win. They don't even say it often. They just get their molecule replicated. Period. Nothing else is accomplished. Just a bunch of aggrandizement. The spectacle of war. So go ahead, romanticize it. Romanticize the ego gratification out of defeating the masses so you can say, I'm smarter or I'm prettier. And don't tell me you're doing something else, because you're not.
What are the physical conditions for the actuality of my present conscious existence? And when you start thinking like that, it leads you to certain forms of religious experience, I think.
Well, whatever. Yeah, it does if you're a creep, an asshole, an idiot, a moron. No, asking the question, you answer it with a simple answer. What is the necessary conditions for my existence? Oh, that's right, evolution. Gladiator war. What's the necessary condition for this ego, for this whole, this biology that contrives desire in the world, that sees beauty in the world? Well, why does it do that? Oh, that's right, because it has an end game strategy, which is make a warrior out of me.
It's not just about reflecting on abstractions. It's about helping yourself through these linguistic practices of metaphysics and philosophical reflection. It's allowing yourself to, in a sense, produce these experiences so that it's no longer an abstraction, but it becomes real for you.
All right, so whatever. So yeah, you just make some shit up, make it real for you, make up a story so you're really cool. Okay, you're not a drunk driver, you're an experimental, risk navigator. So some kind of, just make up some bullshit to say you're not what you are, because you don't like that definition. You don't like the real definition of what you are, a scurving creature, a scheming creature. No, turn it into something more glamorous and call that what? Being intelligent? No, it's not being intelligent. I'm sorry, it's something else. You pick a word, but it's whatever being intelligence over here, what you're doing is over fucking here.
In your concrete experience. ritual practice. So,
all right, so you're using metaphysical, ritual, spiritual, I mean, whatever. So what? And somebody with a rational brain is supposed to engage in this. Sorry. What do I do? What do I do to do that? Knock myself into the prehistoric past? Do I knock the information and knowledge of evolution and science out of my head? Knock out the information about chemistry and physics and biology, so I'll have to replace those disciplines back with boogeyman and spirit god and oogie woogie and voodoo. Yeah, I can go. Maybe I'll get some voodoo.
When I'm doing philosophy, I'm praying. I'm engaging someone else in conversation, or I'm engaging just a piece of paper with my pen and praying to who? Well, to Athena, to God, to Sophia.
Well, whatever. All you're doing, you aren't doing anything anyway, right? These are just programs running inside of you, these conceptual ideas. And so you clung on to a conceptual idea that I think is just totally related to your own ego, like, yeah, this will work for me. I'm going to be, some sort of guru thing. And maybe I can get a gig, just talking bullshit to idiots. And try to aggrandize myself through that mechanism. Yeah, I think that's one of the programs running inside of you. Because frankly, I don't think you're dumb enough to actually fall for it. I really don't. You can see your own apprehension in trying to define what the hell you're doing here. Because you're basically just raping the truth. And you just don't have a good way. You haven't figured out a good word for that yet. Truth raper. But that's what you are.
As I said in my last video, I'm kind of both a polytheist and an atheist. And
truth raper.
Monotheist. And,
truth raper.
A panentheist. There
Truth
are a
raper.
variety of
Truth
theisms.
raper. Yeah, and they're all truth rapers. Yeah, that's what you are. They're all truth rapers. I think that's what I'll call myself, an anti-truth raper.
And depending on my mood or my position in a particular conversation, based on what someone else is saying, I will inhabit those titles strategically, because they all seem to me to hold a piece of the truth, to provide a part of the picture. But we can't...
Yeah, I don't think you could possibly engage with any kind of rational person making rational arguments. You could only engage in somebody who's going to allow you to have 500 miles of comic book pages and just say, yeah, go ahead, scribble whatever you want. Finger paint all you want. And I'll try to look at your silly whatever, scribbles, and we can both sit here and pretend that they're serious, and then we can say, oh, that one looks like a butterfly, and that one looks like a spear, and oh yeah, I guess that's a metaphor for the beauty getting stabbed by the spear of time. Or some kind of crap that you'll just make up. Then we could throw some bones on the ground, and you can sit there and pretend and say, what do they look like to you? And then you can call that psychophysiology. Psychophysiology. Yeah. Because, yeah, you're making it up out of your own psychology. Your own psychology is expressing itself in the vision that it sees in the placement of the arrangement. Arrangopsychophysiology. Arrangophysiology. Psychobabblosity. Yeah, whatever. Truth raper.
We shouldn't collapse the possibilities, the varieties of experience into any literalized.
Oh, look, if we were talking about your sexual practice, then that would be just fine. Yeah, who wants to confine you? Go ahead, have all the delusions you want, all the illusions you want, get in all the positions you want, use all the hardware you want. I don't give a fuck. But you're talking about what reality is here. And you're doing it from some sort of position. I am a doctor of reality. No, you're a doctor of truth raping.
form of thinking or shape of consciousness. We gotta dance, we can't get stuck in one position.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, the truth. Let's not get stuck in that horrible, ugly truth about what we really are. Let's not deal with the consumption, reproduction, cannibalism, and addiction. Let's just rewrite Adam and Eve all over again and come up with a new story so Cinderella can have her magic pumpkin and everything. Everybody can live happily ever after in your delusion that will never be a reality. Fine. Wonderful. And everybody applauds. Because what? Because everybody's an asshole.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, well, I can't thank you for raping the truth. That would be just completely idiotic. So, gee, no thank you to any more truth raping, please. Shit. Anyway, let's go to Edinburgh. Let's go to Edinburgh. Yeah, see what's happening in Edinburgh. Edinburgh University, where we drink with our pinkies all the way in the vertical position.
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Ah, yes.
I'm Wilson Poon. I'm a professor of physics in this university.
Oh,
I
dear.
also contribute to the teaching of a master's course on science and religion in the School of Divinity.
Oh, brilliant.
So I have been...
Physics and divinity. How spectacular. From what appears to be an Asian perspective.
make a public confession with both of my hats on as a physicist, but also in my work on science and religion. I'm actually a great admirer of Professor Latour's books and his articles.
Silly
It gives me great pleasure to deliver the second of his Gifford lectures.
Silly putty.
Just before I give him the plaque.
I would like to give you a lecture on truth raping. You're truth rapers. I shall have a new book out soon called Truth Raper. I think I will have you bent over properly in the cover art. The cover art may have you bent over properly.
I should point out that this lecture is being recorded and videoed.
With the marvels of physical technology that we have mastered with our non-existent knowledge, with our uncertainty about everything in the universe, yet we somehow know how to collect frames of pixels and run them in the proper order, and have the images match the vocal orderation. How do we do that? It must be a complete mystery. How do we know how to do that? Do we acquire facts and knowledge? Or did it just come from the sky? Is that the physics theory in Cambridge and Edinburgh? Is that what they speculate? That it comes from the universe?
So the video will be online on the Gifford website.
Oh dear. Well, anyway, I'll get to this later. Because it's an hour and 20 minutes of mammal mush, I imagine. But I'll watch some of it, maybe, possibly. Ugh, this will be disgusting. I'm sure this is going to be more just horrid truth raping.